Hello, everyone from EdTechTeam Online. We're glad that you're joining us for our Hangout on Air today on redesigning the learning spaces. Today, we have David Saunders with us, and I'll let him introduce himself in just a minute, but just a few reminders. As you're watching, you'll see Dominique on the back channel, and she is going to be going through and checking if you guys are tweeting out any questions or if you're adding any questions to the YouTube live feed. So you can put your questions either place, and she'll be checking in and chiming in with some different questions. So today we're lucky enough to be talking about learning spaces. I know a lot of you guys are thinking about going back to school in the next couple of weeks, maybe next week, maybe you've already started. But we're going to just today be talking about what are some of the things that you can do in your learning space to make it a better space for learning for your students. So our guest today is David Saunders, and Dominique and David met in 2014 at the Google Innovator Academy. That's how they got connected and have stayed in touch, and so she reached out to have him join us. He's also the author of our next round of courses on learning spaces that will be released sometime later this fall. So David, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, your role, where your passions are, and anything else you feel like is important to tell us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Tracy. My name is David Saunders. I am a middle school library media specialist working in Greenwich, Connecticut, and have about, I want to say, I think this is going on my 12th year teaching since finishing my graduate work. And I've worked in, I was a co-teacher in first grade, a co-teacher in fifth grade, and then my first full-time classroom position was a fourth grade teacher in Massachusetts, and then moved to Connecticut about 8 years ago, and have been teaching fifth grade, and also recently moved into the middle school library media specialist position, where I've been able to sort of work with not only our middle school, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, but also our upper school, seventh through ninth graders.
So definitely a lot of experience that you bring to us, David. We're so glad to have you. So specifically, what experience do you have in redesigning learning spaces, or what do you know about learning spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking about that recently. We're in the middle of a construction phase at our school. We're redoing our entire middle school. And so for this upcoming school year, there is no middle school building. And for the previous almost 2 years up to this point, we've been looking at blueprints and construction and what should the spaces look like and how can they, help to support learning, and how do we, further support engagement and collaboration and all these really important things that we know are essential for students. How do we do that in a building? And so it's been a really fascinating sort of exercise to go through in preparation for this new middle school that we're going to have. This year coming up, there is no middle school because we're in that construction phase. And so was reflecting a bit on my path, my educational path over the last 12 years or so. And I think I've had 4 different classrooms on my own because I moved around in fourth grade, and I also moved around when I taught fifth grade, and I've worked in 2 different libraries. And in all of those spaces, I think I have the support of our administrators for me to sort of step in there and say, what do I want to do in this space? What can I do to rethink the form and the function of this room, and think about how it's used and how I think I'd like it to be used, and to be mindful and reflective on sort of what are the elements within this room that can be improved, like what combinations of layout and lighting and color and furniture can we put together to create a space that encourages the 4 C's that I think you all have been talking about in all of your coursework. And I think in all of that, there's that big gap between sort of maybe what I can envision, and that's way up here, and then sort of maybe what I have the bandwidth and the budget for, right? And there's usually a big gap between the two. And so I think in preparation for all of those different learning spaces that I've had sort of a little bit of input on, I took it really seriously. I would scour interior design blogs and magazines for color schemes, I dig through flea markets and garage sales for, wall art, framed portraits, old photographs. I'd look for sculptures, any sort of accoutrement to help make the room unique and stand out in an effort to make it welcoming and engaging, and sort of from that first moment when students walk in on that first morning, for them to look around and say, wow, like this is a really great spot. This is a place I want to be. This is a place I want to hang out. I might go to my other friends' classes, to say hi and hang out with them in the morning, but I'm gonna say, you got to come check out our room. And that's sort of always the metric that I'm using. I really want there to be some excitement on that first morning. And I think as I've gotten older and had 12 years of experience now, I think it's shifted a bit. I think probably at the very beginning, my understanding of good classroom design, I think, was really egocentric. It was what I thought would be good, what I thought would be, oh, I like these colors, or I like the way this is set up. I think the more experience I've had, the older I've gotten, the more I realized that it really should be a partnership between you and the students. And so, it's gone from me, I guess, those early years, like trying to get everything set up perfectly and then don't touch it, right? Like it's perfect, don't mess with it. The colors are just right, the chairs are just right. To now me sort of recognizing and being appreciative of the fact that we're going to start at whatever starting point we get, but we're going to build that classroom, that space together over the course of the year. And so I'm a little less maybe obsessive about it at the outset, but I do that intentionally with the mindset being that we will continue to develop sort of that layout, the space, how it works, how it flows throughout the year, based on the students that I have in the classroom, based on the feedback that I get from them. Yeah, so I guess 4 classrooms, 2 libraries. I could go into detail about sort of what that might look like, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you point out that it really is a partnership between you and the students, that it's not just you totally setting up the room before and them not having a say. So I think that's a really important point for people to think about. How can they give their students a say? With thinking about that, and you can go into this probably will bring in some of that design, but
Sure.
How does space affect learning? Positive, negatively? Just how does space affect it?
Yeah, boy, that's a great one. I mean, I think trying to be mindful of everything that we know about how humans learn, and particularly how students learn, how children learn, right? We know that they need to move around a lot, right? And based on the developmental age in which you're working, they might need to move more frequently than older kids do, right? But trying to be thoughtful around creating sort of the layout of the furniture and the classroom in such a way that allows for frequent fidgeting. So whether that is, I know there's a lot of conversation around flexible seating and having students have the opportunity to sit or stand or sit on couches or whatever. I think that's wonderful. I certainly try and do that to the degree that I'm able in the classrooms that I've had. I know sometimes budget and space and all that can be difficult, but is there a way for us to build workstations, table groups? Is there a way for us to sort of allow for maybe space in the back of the room for kids to stand up and stand in the back of the room when they need to? We always have students who, we're all fidgety. I'm a super fidgety person, and I'm highly distractible. And I was certainly in my classroom needed to move around a lot. And so I'm, always thinking about, what do my students need? What did I need? Trying to put myself in that 6th grader's place. I remember my teachers back in 6th grade absolutely saying, you're wonderful, we love you, but we're going to need you to sit sort of over here because you can't quite focus or you need to get up and walk around. But being mindful of the needs of the students in such a way that, this past year we had a student who needed to walk around like constantly. And so rather than tell him you can't, we just said, okay, like what we need to do is we just need to like shift the seats in such a way, shift the chairs in such a way that we almost have a track around the perimeter of the 3, the back 3 walls of the room. So he can just kind of walk around and do his thing, right? And I think that speaks to how we need to be responsive to the needs of our kids, right? And not try and dictate to them, this is what it looks like to be a learner in this classroom. And I think that's where we can kind of go off the rails a bit, and try and force them into, force the peg into the hole that doesn't quite fit. And so I think the flexible seating is super important, to the degree that it's an option. And when it's not an option, I think we still have the opportunity to even just reconfigure the flow of the classroom in such a way to allow kids to move around a bit. I also think the classroom, I want to say my last year teaching 5th grade which was 3 or 4 years ago now. I moved into a new room, and I think I had recently read Mindset by Carol Dweck and was like, yes, this is going to be the focus of like what we're doing this year in class. We're going to be talking about mindset, growth mindset. We're going to be empowering. We're, all these wonderful things. Your brain is a muscle, needs exercise. And so coming into the classroom, there was this sort of big open wall space. And so, over the summer, I'm sort of obsessing, like, how do I use this new classroom? What can I do? And so I went into Adobe Illustrator, and I, created a digital file that included not only sort of the take-home one-pager message of mindset, which is like growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Your brain is a muscle. I created that. I also created sort of these oversized images of neurons and synapses, and this was probably in the time before schools had vinyl cutters, because we all have maker spaces now. So I found a woman on Etsy who was able to print out in vinyl decal sort of these oversized decals that I had. So when you walked in that first morning, you walked into the room, it was this huge, bright orange. We're the tigers at our school, so orange is our color, right? Bright orange wall, and then over, in huge oversized font, your brain is a muscle. And then it has the text, and then it has the neurons, and then it has all this other information. It was like a 3-panel layout. And the idea being, not only did it bring up conversation constantly on what does that mean and how can I make my brain stronger, and it was a way for me to remind myself of those same things too. And so I, thinking about the classroom not only in terms of like physical layout and color, but is there a way for us to like explicitly communicate sort of the message that we would love our students to take home. And I'm not really a bulletin board person. I have a difficult time keeping bulletin boards up to date. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, the vinyl will be great because I'll put it up and it will be there. Awesome. And then throughout the year, kids are putting up, they're responding to it with sticky notes, right? And so in some ways, there's some interactivity there, but it's not requiring the bulletin board, which I admit is something that I struggle with on a yearly basis.
I definitely did too. I think mine went up, and then I had the intention of changing it all the time, and then you were like, you just get busy and don't get to do it. So those are great options, thinking about that flexible seating piece, that one piece that people can change, and really brings back to your first response too, that you've got to first see who your students are and what their needs are, because you might have some students that need something totally different, some seating that you don't have yet. There were a couple of questions that have come in so far, just talking about, not everybody has a budget at all for going in and changing out the furniture in their classroom. So can you share maybe some small, simple changes and cheap changes that people can implement, or do you have any tips for what people can do to try to get new furniture or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question. I think, for me, sort of that first big tip, I think, is light. The number of times that I walk into classrooms and the blinds are pulled down, right? And it just seems dark and it just seems cavernous. I think the first thing that I always want to do when I go into a new classroom is just pull the blinds all the way up, right? Let in as much light as I possibly can. And I know that can sometimes wreak havoc on like projector displays. But I think absolutely lighting is super important. And so even like a desk lamp or a table lamp or something to help push aside that sort of sterile fluorescent light, blinds drawn feeling of a classroom, and to make it more welcoming and to make it more intimate, I think is really important. I think in terms of, I think the biggest step for me, and this doesn't cost anything, is just the idea of practicing empathy, right? Is trying to put yourself in the place of the students who are going to be or who are in your classroom, and doing so sort of on a fairly regular basis, and I know some teachers who have a system for this, they block it out, once a month. I sit and I sit in the classroom, I have a prep period, or I come in, after school, and I think about each kid, and I think about, where are they in the classroom? What do they need? What am I recognizing? Is there a way for me to reconfigure what we're doing here physically to help them more effectively, maybe, than what we're doing now? And I think being intentional in observing how students are using that space is an incredibly, it's probably the most important thing I think that one can do when it comes to design. And to be thinking, the questions like, is this what I imagined? Is this space being used how I imagined it would be? Is it better than what I imagined? Like, have the students kind of hacked the space that I've created and have found shortcuts or things that I didn't think about, and now maybe I want to incorporate the ideas that they came up with instead? Could it be improved? And I think that's super important. And also, I think getting feedback from the students as well throughout the year in terms of, what are they thinking? What are they experiencing in terms of the space? I think in my years of doing that and getting feedback, I usually do a Google form or something. Sometimes you get, we want an indoor pool in the classroom. We sometimes get those, which is, I would too. I'd love an indoor pool in the classroom. But the idea being that you'll also get some really great, probably, insights that you wouldn't think about because you're not seeing it through their eyes, right? And so to the extent that you can put yourself in their position, put yourself in their seats, right? Shadow them, even just mentally shadow them throughout their experience in the classroom will, I think, help to uncover ways that you could just make a shift, a small shift here or there that I think could make a big difference for the students. Because I think it's a partnership.
Yeah, well, that brings it back too. I think that the students could probably have some really great ideas of how they could get furniture or how they could make some small changes. Even with the existing furniture, I know people have like cut the legs off of tables that they already have, and then you have low seating and find some pillows somewhere.
Right. Right.
So
and I know that we, this is a fairly new thing for us, and I think it came to light because we're in construction. In moving from our middle school to our from our old middle school to our new middle school, we have all this furniture that we're not going to keep because we're moving into new space and we want all new furniture, right? So that's part of the fundraising that we came up with for this new building is we're getting rid of all this furniture. And we have a director of sustainability who was like, let's find a way to get this furniture that's, most of it is still in great working condition, right, into the hands of teachers who need it, right? So she's helped to sort of put together a program for schools in our area who might want these desks and tables and chairs and whatever it is that we have that we're not going to keep. And I imagine there's probably quite a few schools in similar situations around the country that are in transition, are in construction, or are just phasing out older new furniture. I know our library has phased in and out furniture a couple times. And we've always been able to find other local schools that are like more than willing to take the things that we're looking for. So I'm wondering if there might be a network in whatever area that you're in where schools might be creating these partnerships where they're sort of exchanging furniture that they no longer need.
Yeah, I love that. I do know that my son's old preschool teacher, she went in to teach 4th grade and she put something out on Facebook, and just the other day she showed a picture of, she had, random different chairs, but it was her start. It was her way of starting that journey of offering different flexible seating. So David, that's awesome. That's great advice. Is there anything else that you could share with us about design and space? Any last minute tips or just thoughts for teachers as they're going through their unit on learning spaces?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you want your classroom to be a place where kids want to spend time. And so to the degree that you have any input and any agency in how that classroom is set up. I know some people share classrooms with other teachers, and so maybe they might not have as much flexibility in how the chairs are set up or things like that. But to whatever degree it is that you have for that, I think our ultimate goal is to empower our students and to give them some level of ownership and control of that space. And so we could talk about paint color, we could talk about matching drapes and all that. And I love that stuff. And I would love to spend time sort of hourly going through my classroom and trying to do that. But I know I often don't have the time or the money to do it. And I know most people don't either. So I don't think necessarily it's about that. I think it's about finding those hacks. And I think it's about finding ways to be responsive to the needs of the students and creating an environment where they feel like they have ownership, where this is their space and it's not just your space and they're living in it. And I think, you know, it might seem like a small distinction, but I think it's really important for them. I think when kids feel like they have control over their learning space, they feel more at peace, they feel more in tune, and they're more willing to engage in the activities and to give feedback on how it could be more improved. If they're feeling like their input is not important, then they're probably not going to give you great feedback on what the classroom is like for them, because they feel like maybe their voice isn't being heard. And so I think research pretty clearly shows that control over one's workspace improves satisfaction, commitment, involvement, motivation. So I think that partnership, we're in this together, this is our shared space. I had a conversation with Doug Robertson recently about this and how he thinks about his classroom as a shared space and how essential that is for his classroom culture and community. And I couldn't agree more. I really think when we're talking about design and we're talking about creating those flexible learning spaces, I think it is what is our goal, and then sort of what degree do we have any control over that? And let's not lose sight of the fact that we're really just trying to create a place where kids feel empowered and like this is their space and they want to be there and they want to spend time in that place.
David, that is such an important piece to leave us with. I love that thought, just really thinking about the fact that you want it to be a place where your kids want to learn, those students want to learn. So thank you for your tips and tricks today. And if you guys have anything else to share, you can tweet it out using the EdTechTeam Online hashtag. And make sure to also tweet out to @DesignSaunders if you have any more questions for him. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, David, so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Oh, Dominique, there's one thing.
Yeah, there was one question that just came in from Teresa. Any suggestions for specials teachers such as art, music, etc., who have different students in and out all day?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. I mean, my only experience with that is sort of as the library makerspace coordinator, where I have students in and out all the time. And so the big thing I think is it's resource management and organization. And so trying to find, based on whatever space you have. So I'm thinking if you're a music teacher versus an art teacher, it might be different than sort of the makerspace. So I can really only speak to that. But I think for me, trying to think about a place where students are in and out all day long, different groups, different times, different kids, who knows, sometimes they're at recess, sometimes they're coming in for classes, trying to find not only an easy way for them to access the materials, and so having sort of the bins for projects with kids' names on them and grade level and things like that, but also a shared space for them to work collaboratively together. Has been huge for me. So I'm not, I wish I had a great answer for art or music. I don't, although I could certainly reach out to some people that I know who do teach art and music who do some wonderful things.
Great, thank you. Dominique, looks like one maybe more question came in. Should learning spaces be primarily for getting the learners involved, or is there consideration for spaces that afford learners getting to a volatile state to diffuse? So is it coming in, Dominique, the rest of the question? So
no, that question's from Barb. That's
okay.
What was that?
Should learning spaces be primarily for getting the learners involved?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there consideration for spaces that afford learners to, you know, get to a different state? Or do you see the?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, my thought on that is I think our goal is to maximize engagement with our students. But but in the same way that I think we need to be responsive to the kids that are before us. I mean, I'm thinking of Alice Keeler, who always says, like, people ask me what my curriculum is, and I always tell them, I don't know, because it depends on the kids I have that particular year, or the students I have that particular year. It's not one consistent thing. And so I think classroom design and setup can be the same thing. And so I think our goal is to maximize engagement and performance and all of that. But I think if we have students that need that space, then I think absolutely it would be not only in the interest of the community, but particularly for that student to find a place for them to cool down and to sort of get into a place where they can re-enter and re-engage with the learning that's happening in the classroom. That's a super great question. Yeah, I think being responsive to the needs in that class. And so, you know, if it's one student versus 5 or 6 students, I think that would change how I would probably set up that classroom based on sort of what my capacity would be for having one student in sort of a cool down area versus 5 or 6 at a given time. And so, yeah, absolutely being mindful to make sure that every student has a place where they can go where they need to cool off or to disengage, to shut off for a minute before they can get back into that place where they can meaningfully engage with the curriculum.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good thing to think about. I think it's hard for teachers too, who sometimes feel like everything has to be set up day one before everybody walks in. So it's a little bit of a mindset change to say, you know, I'm going to set up my classroom like this, but it's going to be fluid and it's going to change depending on what the needs of those students are this year.
Absolutely.
So David, once again, thank you. And remember, if there are more questions, we're happy to answer them. Just make sure you use the EdTechTeam Online hashtag and also include @Design Saunders. So David, thank you so much. And Dominique, thanks for taking the back channel. And we'll see you guys all online soon. This was our last Hangout on Air for this cohort, but you can always come back and watch the ones for the next cohort. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, David. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.